I have in my background the most amazing celebration. Fireworks and being in a fun place and enjoyment. And I'm going to tarnish it just a bit. So we either have the joy and celebration that is shared with God because we are with Him, or we encourage and invite the celebration and temptations that Satan brings. Is God celebrating with you by fireworks and joy and love, or is the enemy celebrating and dancing in your soul? Now, I'm going to tell you that the biggest way, largest, most effective way to keep Satan from dancing in your soul is to make sure that God is always within you, that you are always filled with God. And I also believe another way to keep the temptations at bay is to know your weaknesses, to embrace them, to lift them up to God, to ask Him for help in your times of weakness. Why is it important to realize our weaknesses and to embrace them and ask God to take care of them and ask others to cover our weaknesses in prayer? Because I promise you, even if you are not aware of your weaknesses, Satan is. Oh, he knows your weaknesses very well. And with your weaknesses is how he invites you into temptation. And when you are invited into temptation, if you are not prepared to stay away from that temptation with the filling of the Holy Spirit and with knowing your weakness and going to God when it happens, when you are allow that temptation to expand in your soul, then the enemy is dancing, celebrating, and having a lot of fun like you would at Disneyland during the fireworks show. So, Thomas Kempis has a brief writing. Well, he has lots of writings, but I want to share a brief one, just a paragraph entitled Temptations Reveal Who We Are. The beginning of all evil temptations is an unstable mind and a small trust in God. Don't run away. I want you to embrace this. When we embrace the temptation, we don't have very much faith in God. Just as a ship without a helm is tossed about by the waves, so a person who lacks resolution and certainty is tossed about by temptation. Do you hear that? If you're not certain about what your weakness is, you will be tossed about because the enemy is very certain about your weaknesses. Temptation reveals our instability and our lack of trust in God. Temptation reveals who we are. This is why we must pay attention to them. I'm going to read it again to you. The beginning of all evil temptation is an unstable mind and a small trust in God. Just as a ship without a helm is tossed about by the waves, so a person who lacks resolution and certainty is tossed about by temptations. Temptation reveals our instability and our lack of trust in God. Temptations reveal who we are. This is why we must pay attention to them. We must pay attention to our temptations, pay attention to our weaknesses so we can stop them in our tracks, so that we can go to God, so that we can know what the weakness is and how the enemy attacks us and ask God to fight for us. When we ask God to fight for us in our weak times of our lives, He will. Let God celebrate with you with fireworks and be overjoyed in your happy place rather than the enemy. The choice is yours. So this week, I invite you to really explore, delve down deep what your weaknesses are and how the enemy has tempted you in the past and what your weaknesses are and how he could potentially tempt you in the future. And keep those forefront in your mind, because then when you are tempted and you know that's your weakness, you can go to God in prayer immediately and ask him for help getting the enemy out and celebrating with God within. Have a great week.